The movie starts with Richard Williams at a country club, trying to convince tennis coaches to train his daughters, Venus and Serena. He's been working hard to get them ready for greatness, but every coach turns him down, either because of his background or because they're wary of parents who aggressively promote their kids as future stars. Richard heads home to the house he shares with his wife, Brandy, and her daughters, Tund, Isha, and Lindria. He gathers the girls into his bus and drives them to the park so he can train Venus and Serena. An old man tells Richard to get some rest, but Richard shrugs it off and says sleep only leads to dreams. While Tund is trying to study there, a local thug named Rock starts harassing her with rude comments. Richard steps in, gets the girls back in the bus, and confronts Rock, reminding him, yet again, to leave Tund alone. But Rock and his crew just mock Richard, and things get physical when Rock punches and kicks him. Back at home, Richard talks with Brandy. She's worried about how far he's pushing the girls in the name of preparing them for greatness. But Richard stands firm. He's sure that Venus and Serena are destined for something big. That night, he heads to his job as a security guard and continues reaching out, trying to find a coach for the girls. He eventually meets with Vic Braden, whose instructional video he had seen. Richard shows him a tape of Venus and Serena playing. Vic admits they have talent, but still turns them down for coaching. Later that night, after taking the family out to eat, Richard heads to the park to get in some practice alone. Rock and his crew show up again, messing with him and throwing insults. Richard tries to ignore them and walk away, but when Rock makes another nasty comment about Tund, Richard loses it and smacks him in the face with his tennis racket. Rock's guys jump in and start beating him. Rock pulls out a gun and threatens him but eventually backs off, saying no one would care if anything happened to Richard. Later, Richard comes home, and Brandy tends to his injuries. The next day, Richard takes Venus and Serena to a country club, hoping to get the attention of Coach Paul Cohen. On the way, they drive past a row of fancy houses. Richard turns to them and says, "One day, you're going to have a house like that, maybe even better. Because we always have a plan, and we stick to it. That commitment will pay off. Now come on, show them how dangerous you are. Let's see those dangerous faces." They arrive at a country club, where they find Coach Paul Cohen on the court working with John McEnroe and Pete Sampras. Richard asks him, "Can you watch my kid hit the ball for a bit?" But the coach rejects it because he's short on time. Luckily, John McEnroe leaves, so Richard takes his chance. He asks Pete Sampras, "Would you mind watching my kid play for a minute?" Pete is cool with it, and Paul eventually agrees to let the girls show what they've got. He rallies with Venus for a bit, and is genuinely impressed by her skills. The coach seems more interested in Venus, and decides to become her coach. When they get home, they surprise everyone by saying they've found a coach. But it turns out Serena would need to pay for coaching. Since they can't afford it, Richard can't bring himself to tell Serena and asks his wife to do it. Serena is upset and thinks it's not fair, but her mom quickly tells, "You've got great talent too, starting now, because I'll be coaching you." We see Venus going through professional training while Serena gets coached by her mom with what they have.
I need you to be fast, up, fast. Keep it up. You never know when it's going. Get back to the middle. Stay low. Yeah, baby, yes.
During practice, Richard starts clashing with Paul over technique, especially when Paul tells Venus to open her stance, which Richard doesn't agree with. Later on, Paul shows them a video of Jennifer Capriati as an example and suggests that Venus should start entering junior tournaments. Richard and Venus agree to move forward with it. Venus starts competing in junior tournaments and quickly dominates, beating every girl she plays against.
Stupid! You're so bad!
That's it.
After one of her wins, the family is celebrating, and the girls start bragging about Venus's victory. Richard isn't happy about it. He sends them all into a shop and starts driving the bus home alone, saying he warned them not to brag and was ready to make them walk the 3 miles back. Brandy, not having it, makes him pull over so they can catch up to the bus. Once they're home, Richard has them sit down and watch Cinderella to teach a lesson about staying humble. Later, after a practice at the park, Richard returns to find social services at the house. Mrs. Strickland had called them, claiming the girls were being abused. Richard calmly shows the agents that the girls are healthy, cared for, and getting their education. The family heads out for another one of Venus's tournaments, but while they're focused on her match, Serena secretly signs up for the 10-year-old competition without Richard knowing. He and Brandy only find out when another parent casually mentions how great both of their daughters are. Curious, they go looking and find Serena in action. Richard watches her and realizes she's just as talented as Venus. In the end, Venus and Serena win trophies. Venus offers to swap, saying, "I like the silver one." Later, the girls are gathered with other young players while Nancy Reagan gives a speech. During the event, Coach Paul introduces Richard to 2 sports agents, George MacArthur and Laird Stabler. Things seem to go well until Laird calls Venus's wins incredible, which Richard takes as a backhanded compliment. He thinks they're only impressed because she's black. He turns them down and accidentally farts at the end of the meeting. Paul later talks with Richard and Brandy about what happened, especially since Richard is now planning to pull Venus out of the juniors and have her face more serious, pro-level competition. Feeling like Paul no longer aligns with their goals, Richard decides to cut ties with him altogether. Brandy, however, isn't happy with how Richard handled the situation. Richard eventually gets in touch with Rick Matchy, a well-known tennis coach, to train both Venus and Serena. After watching them play, Rick is impressed and offers to bring them to Florida for serious training. Richard negotiates for the whole family to move with them, except for Tund, who stays behind to focus on her college studies. Once they settle in Florida, Richard quickly starts stepping on Rick's toes, wanting to have a say in how the girls are coached. Despite the tension, time passes and Rick becomes genuinely proud of Venus's progress. Richard sees a news report that Jennifer Capriati has been arrested for drug use, right after he had asked Rick whether Jennifer, his former student, had really dropped out of the upcoming tournament due to burnout. Concerned about his own daughters, Richard decides to skip practice that day and takes the family to Disney World instead. When they get home, Rick is waiting and clearly frustrated. He calls Richard out for ditching practice and questions his decision. Richard explains that he doesn't want Venus and Serena to end up like Jennifer, burned out and overwhelmed. Rick fires back, accusing Richard of doing everything to satisfy himself while claiming it's all for the girls. Tensions boil over. Venus storms out of the house, and Richard and Brandy get into an argument in the kitchen. Brandy, fed up, tells him that she's only sticking around for the sake of their daughters. Later that night, Richard trains with Venus outside. She tells him she wants to compete in the tournament, but she feels like he doesn't believe she's ready. That's when Richard opens up about his childhood, how, growing up in Shreveport, he once accidentally touched a white man's hand and was beaten up for it while his own father ran away. From that moment on, Richard promised himself he'd never run away from his kids. The family travels to Oakland for the tournament, where they meet with an agent who offers Venus a $3 million contract. Since they aren't ready to decide right away, the agent tells them the offer stands until the tournament starts. Richard shares his doubts about taking the deal with Rick, who thinks Richard's being crazy for even considering turning it down. Venus, however, tells Rick she wants the agents to see just how good she really is on the court. Venus's first match is against Shawn Stafford. It's a tough, intense game, but Venus pulls off the win. Afterward, she's interviewed and talks about how thrilled she is with the win. She's confident she'll take on anyone in the next match. Later, Rick learns that Venus will face off against the world's top player, Arantxa Sanchez Vicario. Rick isn't confident Venus can win, but Richard believes in her completely. Before the big match, Richard spots Serena watching the arena, feeling a bit left out. He reassures her, saying that while Venus will become a great athlete, he truly believes Serena will be the greatest of all time. On the night of the big match, Venus braids her hair and steps onto the court to face Vicario. Venus takes an early lead, which clearly frustrates Vicario. During a break, Vicario says she's going to the bathroom but takes so long that it feels like she's just trying to mess with Venus. Vicario finally comes back, and the match goes on. But Venus starts to lose her focus and even takes a tumble.
6-3, 1-7, 3 games all.
Richard, looking really worried, tries to get closer to her. In the end, Venus ends up losing the match. Afterwards, Venus breaks down crying in the locker room. Richard and Brandy come in to cheer her up, reminding her this isn't the end of her journey. Richard tells, "You did great, holding your own against the world's top player. You shook things up. But if you don't value yourself now, you won't become the next champion. So get up and go out there with confidence." As they step outside, they see a group of young girls cheering for Venus, with Rick among them, already seeing her as a champion. The closing text reveals that 9 months later, Venus lands a $12 million contract with Reebok at just 15. Serena joins her on tour 2 years later, but Richard still makes sure their education and family come first. By age 41, Venus had won Wimbledon 5 times and was the first African-American woman to be ranked number 1. Serena, at 40, had 23 Grand Slam titles under her belt and was known as one of the greatest tennis players of all time, just like Richard said.